Sleep is a tricky beast.
You know, it seems like humans are the only species on this planet who struggle with something as simple as falling asleep at night and waking up full of energy in the morning. Why is that?
The moment that you feel like I'm suffering in bed, get out of the bed now. Get out and go to the living room, find your favorite couch, grab your favorite book, light a candle, put yourself in the most restful and restorative space that you can.
Right.
And then when you feel yourself start to droop to go, head back to the bed and keep doing that.
And I've noticed it. There is a seasonality to my sleep cycles. I sleep differently in summer than I do in winter.
Michael, I think if someone had just said to me, I don't know, a year or less into the insomnia that I was experiencing in 2018, hey, Nick, whatever you do before 10 a.m., get your butt on the street and walk for 30 minutes, I think it would have shaved a year or a year off my insomnia.
With all of the things I can do intermittently, I feel great. If I try to do it with sleep, not so much. Welcome to the Primal Shift podcast. Hey, Nick, thrilled to have you on the podcast to talk again about a topic that seems so complex. Well, easy really at the end of the day, but a lot of people seem to struggle with that. You know, we raise a lot of different animals. None of those animals ever come to me and say, hey, Michael, you know, I need your advice. I don't sleep well. You know, it seems like humans are the only species on this planet who struggle with something as simple as falling asleep at night and waking up full of energy in the morning. Why is that?
That's a great question. You know, I'm going to answer it indirectly because I'm not sure that I know the exact answer. So, one of the things that the book that I'm promoting Sleep Fitness about has a chapter that reminds me of the question. And after about 6 years of studying, I realized actually, if you're into like history and archaeology and anthropology, and you think about the tribesmen around the fire protecting the food and the family, we evolved to be able to stay awake. Now, if you're like come from a monotheistic Christian background, then you believe that God designed us. So like tonight, you could decide to stay up.
Right.
It might not be fun the next day. You could do it another day, but probably by the third day, you'd probably have enough.
Right.
So one of the things in the book is that I make that known right away. I think the chapter is called, it's like one of the first or second ones. It's like, and I'm happy to send your viewers a copy of that chapter because it's kind of interesting for people to be like, we are? But I thought we had to sleep every night. And it's like, no, we don't actually have to. That's the big surprise. So that's something I find, Michael, that when people understand that and really own that, they don't panic as much. So I'll have a client who has that same feeling of you of like, what's wrong with us? Why aren't we falling asleep? And then for an individual, it's like, oh my God, it's 3 a.m. and I'm still awake. Oh my God, it's 4:30. Oh my God, I have to get up in 30 minutes and drive. Oh my God, there's a problem. I'm freaking out. I've had clients where that's been the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And simply having them read that chapter and go over that with them until they really get like, oh, so I could stay up and probably not do that bad that day. Like, it's not pleasant, but I can do it. So it just sort of takes people's like that rigid belief that I must sleep every night and calms it down. And, you know, I say like over a third of the people that I work with, anxiety is there in some way or another. And when people don't sleep and they think that that's going to be the end of the world, what happens? They get more anxious. So your question is, well, there's an old, I call it old sleep knowledge, which is like, well, Michael, you better get your sleep every night. And new sleep knowledge is like, no, you're actually capable not to. And in today's, you know, I could give you blanket answers as to why we're not sleeping compared to animals, which is we have rampant burnout. which is causing immense anxiety, which is causing immense amount of sleep disorders that's going on, and it's increasing every year. So just the pressure society wise for working professionals is at an all-time high. So yeah, again, it's a bad situation. There's not a fun, friendly Matthew Walker mechanical answer to your question. A lot of it gets roped up in because people are anxious,
Right.
or they don't feel like they're producing at work, so they feel guilty and they have to stay up. So that's where you kind of get into that of an answer, which is a
Hmm.
grayer answer than I think you wanted.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't really expect a clear cut answer because I don't know that there is one, and I'm not aware
No.
of one either. And so to kind of unpack what you said, because I agree, and I want to push back on one of the things you said. The one thing is I've noticed this in the past when I started taking my sleep hygiene more seriously.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was incredibly rigid. If a kid would come, one of our kids would come in the middle of the night and wake me up, I'm like, fuck, now my sleep is disrupted. I lost half an hour, 45 minutes, and kind of it at the end of the day, thinking that way caused more harm than good for
Right.
the quality of the remainder of my sleep,
Right.
but overall, obviously. So by letting loose and saying, you know what, if tonight I know we're gonna have friends over, and I know who you are if you listen to this, they come over and we are up until 11, which is 2 hours, later than we usually go to bed, sometimes 2.5 hours. By just saying, you know what, I'm okay with going to bed later today for the benefit of enjoying, our friends. And by making that mental switch of not freaking out that I might not get optimal sleep that day, I've been sleeping better, So totally agree with that. And I think that a lot of people, and I've talked to, friends and family who struggle with sleep, they go through the exact same thing. They worry so much that it prevents them from what they are trying to accomplish. They are in their own way, basically, by being in their head and by being anxious about, I must get this sleep right. Otherwise, terrible things are going to happen. We need to interrupt this episode for a quick shout out to our sponsor, OneSkin, because let's be honest, nobody wants the skin cells checking out early. It's called cell senescence, when your cells basically start acting old and sluggish. And OneSkin's OS1 peptide is clinically proven to help slow that down. Plus, it's free of those nasty chemicals you'd rather not have hanging around. If you're ready to give your skin some extra love, head over to oneskin.co, that's oneskin.co, and use code MKUMMER for 15% off. Now back to our regular scheduled program before any more cells decide to retire. Obviously, if you struggle with sleeping well every single night and it takes you until 3 a.m. to fall asleep, and then you have to get up at 5, you can only do that for so long before you're gonna pay the price, right? So saying every day,
it's for a long time, So I remember one of the first people that I worked with, and they said, yeah, I have this woman, she has a lot of anxiety, she doesn't sleep enough. Well, it wasn't until subsequent conversations that I found out this lady's 72 years old. Depending on a couple things, she's not really expected to sleep as much.
right.
So she was living in an old world of like, no, if I don't get 8 hours of sleep, and I haven't gotten 8 hours of sleep forever, like this is a huge problem. And so the first thing we did was sit down and I just showed her some of the articles of like, no, it's okay, it's normal. And just like taking that panic down was one level. But the thing I was going to share with you before was that I had this one woman who was like, I've been suffering from insomnia for 10 years, and, what can you do? And we corresponded back and forth. And I said, hey, I wanted to thank her for helping me. And I said, hey, listen, I'll give you one of the only 2 rules I give clients in the 6-week training program. And I said, number 1 is no suffering in bed. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, tell me this. When you walk by your bedroom during the day and you look in, do you think to yourself, that's the place that I suffer? And she was like, yeah, right? And so I was like, for the next 6 weeks, the moment that you feel like I'm suffering in bed, could be like, damn, I've been going back and forth for 40 minutes and I haven't fallen asleep. Get out of the bed now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Get out and go to the living room, find your favorite couch, grab your favorite book, light a candle, put yourself in the most restful and restorative space that you can.
Right.
And then when you feel yourself start to droop to go, head back to the bed and keep doing that. And honestly, when I say that, people think like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do that 50 times.
Mm-hmm.
No, I haven't met anyone that had to do it more than 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
4 weeks later, I checked in on the lady and I just said, hey, how's it going? Like, it's not like I really gave her a lot of tools to do other
Right.
than, hey, just get out of your bed when you realize, oh no, I'm like suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote back and was just like, Nick, oh my God, I've had insomnia for 10 years. Do you know how much of a nice, first of all, it was just nice to have times at night that were nice. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so many people, Michael, you know, we're really looking society wise, conservatively, 1 in 3 people. Likely, pretty close to 2 to 3 people are having that issue. So for
Mm-hmm.
her, just be like, oh my God, that's the first time in 10 years, like, I didn't perfectly go to bed, Nick, right away in 2 weeks. But I started having nice moments at night that I hadn't had for over 10 years.
Right.
You know, so just sometimes that one little thing, to your point earlier, is like it's a mental thing. I think I twice tried to trick the 2 smartest guys I know about sleep with a question. One was on a podcast, and he's the one guy's a Canadian CEO and founder of a neurotech product that's going to come out. And I tried to catch him at the end of the thing. I was like, "Hey, if you had to like pick one product for your family for sleep that wasn't the one that you're selling, what would it be?" And he didn't hesitate for a second. He was like, education. And I was like, that was such a lame answer. And then like 8 months later, I talked to this other guy. I tried the same thing on him, and he's like, education. And this guy had been in the sleep industry, like Michael Pioneer, like 40 years, you know, taking phone calls from Phil Jackson with the Chicago Bulls stuck at the airport. And he's like, how do I get to get these guys to go to sleep? I tried to float him the same answer to be like, is there a product out there that I could help my own followers find out about? And his was education. So it's weird. A year later, I still find like, oh, educational things and new understandings and new ideas are still a welcome and needed thing for people to help sort of put boxes around how they think about sleep and then manage their sleep better.
You know, I've been paying attention to how I feel for about a decade now, and I can certainly tell that, or in the past, I would think that if I don't get, you know, X number of hours of sleep, I don't function well. These days, I don't have an alarm. You know, I wake up when I wake up, and then in retrospect, I kind of look, okay, how long did I really sleep? You know, how much time did I spend awake at night? How much time did I spend in the various stages of sleep? You know, assuming that the numbers I'm getting are somewhat in the ballpark. And I can tell that if I sleep less than 7 hours and 15 minutes, I'm not at the top of my game.
Yeah.
I function. I would argue I function better than most others, but I don't function as well as I
Right.
can based on my own, you know, baseline. And
Right.
so I know that for me, a somewhat consistent bed and wake time are crucial to optimal performance.
Yeah.
You know,
Now
but
I
again,
will
if mhm,
go ahead.
go ahead.
The only thing that you were talking about earlier, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but it's one of the chapters in my book is that I highlighted for today, especially when I was thinking about how you approach fitness kind of from all angles. And there are some fitness practices from nutrition, diet, physical fitness where really snagging a perfect repeatable routine is the key to momentum and building. In sleep, it's a trap to try to go for perfect
Hmm.
because you set off a couple different things. You set up well, what if I don't, like, I'll give you an example. I get this with a lot of clients in the beginning. We'll go over what their plan is, and then Michael's like, "Oh my God, I'm running a get together. It's going to run until 2 in the morning in 4 weeks. It's going to destroy all of my momentum." And so I have to say, "No, calm down, calm down. If you went to the gym for the next 4 weeks and missed one workout and picked it up for the next 2 weeks, what would happen?" And they're like, "Nothing much." I'm like, "Same thing." Like, when I find a lot of them try to go for perfect, I have a guy recently who I'm working with, and right off the bat, to your point, anxiety being like right out of the gate, he knew. I think I have anxiety. I think I have ruminating thoughts and stuff. So it's like over a third of the people I talk to, that's what the thing was. But when we had our first check in a couple of weeks, it came out that he hadn't done much of the sleep plan. He had worked on some of the burnout training that I was giving him, which was working good, but he kind of stunk it up with the sleep training.
Mm-hmm.
And we have trust and rapport, and so we can joke, and I can hear him. I say, "Okay, so you didn't do great, but we figured it out," which was, if I don't do it perfectly at the time we said we'd do it, for the length that I said I would do it, for the number of days I said I would do it, then I don't do it at all.
Right.
So I try to get people to be like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It could be 10:45 one night and 10:30 the other night, and or the numbers could fluctuate. And so just loosening up a bit, because people can
Mm-hmm.
get so tight about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of intermittent living, and I say living because I try to apply that intermittent concept to dieting, to exercising, to really everything. Because you know, back in the days, humans did not have a fridge where they could just eat whenever they wanted. No, they had to hunt, and sometimes the hunt was unsuccessful, so they had to fast, right?
Right.
Sometimes they had to abstain from water if they couldn't find any clean, source. Sometimes they couldn't sleep because one guy needed to watch the fire and make sure that no wild animal would attack the tribe or whatever. There's
Exactly.
always an intermittent concept to most of what we should be doing. And I would argue that why not apply that intermittent idea also to sleeping? However,
Tell me what your thought is about that.
well,
Because there
uh
are some
yeah,
versions, there are some versions, like once in a long while I'll get someone that wakes up all the time through the night. And there's a book, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my hand, who has a totally different method of training sports people, and it's exactly like you said. They're going for 90-minute cycles.
hmm
So they'll report to him like, "Oh, hey Bob, man, last night I had 5 cycles." They don't talk like, "Oh no, I got my 7.5 hours."
hmm
So I'm interested to hear what you think about that in terms of how you would apply that to sleep.
yeah. I mean, that's a great idea. I mean, I know that I wake up, or at least I I don't wake up and like get up and and walk around the house, but I do wake up roughly after every sleep cycle, right? When you get out of the the REM sleep or deep sleep, and you have a brief moment of awakening, and then you fall back asleep. Kind of, that's a perfectly normal cycle. And if I notice that I've and I've noticed that there is a seasonality to my sleep cycles. I sleep differently in summer than I do in winter. Um, and so, maybe there is an argument to be made that, and even my sleep timing differs, because in summer, I'm not going to go to bed when it's still light outside, right? I try to go to bed after the sun is set, after
Yeah.
there is no more light, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
that already defines my changes in sleep, in my sleep pattern, because it's different in winter than in summer. And but even with sleep cycles, I notice there are times where I wake up at a certain time and I feel like my cortisol is higher than it should be at that time of the day, and I feel like mildly awake, and my wife has the same. We don't have that very often, but it does happen. And and sometimes I just get up, get a glass of water, whatever, go to the bathroom, go back to sleep, and I fall asleep then relatively quickly. But there is the time where I'm awake, where my sleep is interrupted.
Yeah.
um, However, one thing that I've noticed is by making changes to my sleep cycle that are not gradually, so not going from summer to fall into winter, like changing it over the course of weeks or even months. If I say, you know what, usually the last couple of days I went to bed at 9, next few days I'm going to go to bed at 10:30, I can feel the impact on my mental performance when I do that. And the more the more I get away from my normal sleep routine, let's say, we go somewhere, we come back at midnight, let's say, I can feel that in a negative way for the next couple of days. So when I don't eat, I feel great. When on a day I don't work out, I feel great. With all of the things I can do intermittently, I feel great. If I try to do it with sleep, not so much.
Yes, it is its own beast. I mean, the more I learn about it, the more I'm amazed by how much it informs our total health. And I think this is one of the things where when I looked at like your podcast description, there's this great listing of all these sort of health related topics. And I thought about how so many of them have a very strong industry, or there's a very strong catalog of confirmed information. But right now, the sleep industry is so broken. So we think about some of those core issues that you guys address on this podcast. There's university academic researchers who specialize in those things, who have connections with sports teams, have connections with independent trainers, who are testing different studies that they can cross collaborate with. That relationship is not there in the sleep world. So when the more I thought about sleep, when I thought about public health and doctors, I realized, we got to a point with obesity where primary care physicians in the US were like, we can't keep up. We can't help these people. We need physical trainers. And then suddenly we have a whole physical fitness industry with clothes and research and constant books and different diets and so on, mentors, leaders, gyms, training facilities. There's an industry, and that industry is hardly existent in the sleep world.
Mm-hmm.
So as I told them, I said, listen, like, I'm cool to take the loss. I'm not copywriting the term, and I don't really care if no one ever adopts it. But we need something where we can go, oh, that makes sense. And it kind of brings some of my ideas together, but it also tells me maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. And I think
Right.
that's one of the big shockers, I think, Michael, about folks today, is that a lot of people think, well, I know enough about sleep. Like, my sleep's fine, or they'll sort of be like, it's good enough. And so it's like, ooh, I don't think that you're aware of, like, things have evolved. There's new information out there. It's just not disseminated in a way that's very practical for people.
Mm-hmm. But one of the things I've noticed that a lot of the things that we do from a biohacking, health optimization, perspective, many of the things that I do, it's all trying to mitigate the shitty lifestyle that we all live. Right? Because if you live out in the woods, with your family, disconnected from social media, disconnected from EMFs, you grow your own food.
You're sleeping well.
You're sleeping well. That there is
Yeah.
not really much you need to do. So my question is, I obviously understand. I much like I understand the need for medication.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to mitigate my shitty lifestyle and then just medicate and hope I'm gonna be okay somewhat. But I do understand that if I have a certain condition, and in addition to making lifestyle changes, I can now do something to make a meaningful impact. And how much of what you teach is about getting your shitty lifestyle together, and making meaningful changes. Maybe, the job that you have is crap and it's not sustainable. Regardless of what you do, you will never be 100% if you continue working for this company in a cubicle, for 60 hours a week.
No, I think that's where the line gets drawn for me is, and you use shitty lifestyle, and I would probably say that shows up as this really insane level of burnout we're increasingly seeing. So the more I worked with people, the one of the things that was coming out of it is people were becoming a lot more burnout resistant, right? In a way, they were doing what you're saying. They were sort of taking care of their life more. So I was like, ooh, I think we need to do some focus on training around that. So that's something I've introduced, and I'm just testing it with some clients, and they really appreciate it. And I'll give you an example. It's just there's been a lot of books in the last, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years about around rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, another one of those old sleep knowledge would say, well, okay, I'm Michael and I just worked for 40 minutes at my desk doing creative content posts and I got it to all my social media platforms. I've done it. Now I need to get to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned enough about burnout and rest where when I'm training someone with it, it's like as soon as you hit that point, you're going to take at least a 10-minute break. Your body is totally passive and you let your mind wander. And what a lot of people that I find don't understand yet, and this is usually kind of a fun, helpful moment, is they think the mind turns off. But having to have done some work around ADHD and sleep, it became clear that, whoa, even if you go and lie down for 10 minutes after a work session and just relax your body and let your mind go wherever, you're not like, okay, what was that list? And I need to like make sure. And like, do I remember? No, you just let your mind wander. That it's extremely active. If you stick it in an fMRI machine, it's like, why isn't it resting? They have like a measurement. It's like a half a kilowatt of energy less. So if you know anything about REM sleep, one of the things that I found is when you research these sort of non-directional focused states of mind and give yourself those respites during the day, I don't always want to sell everything because it's productive, but I'd be lying to say to you, those 10 minutes are going to be hugely productive.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain will start connecting things. And often I'll tell
Right.
people, hey, if you're doing this and you're lying on a yoga mat or something, put a little notepad next to it. Because suddenly you might be like, oh my God, I totally forgot to send Michael that thing and I need to tell him. Good, just write it down and go back to relaxing. What you do during the day has a much more dramatic effect on how you're going to sleep that night than the last few things you do before you go to bed.
Right.
So that's why I'm starting to integrate a daytime burnout training for people, because I'm like, you're starting to set yourself up well for at night. It's like, to your point, I remember a guy that I was just meeting and we were colleagues, and he said something, oh, my wife and I, we sleep like babies. We lie down and we just pass out. Well, like 4 minutes later, it becomes clear that the two of them hike 3 or 4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, do you think that might have something to do with it? Like, maybe. Just I'm guessing. It's a theory. It probably could. You know.
For me, good sleep starts when I wake up. If I get outside in the morning, be in the early sun, that sets me up for a good night's sleep. If I go right to the office, under artificial light, sedentary, not moving, I don't sleep as well. And yeah, so I totally agree. What you do during the day matters a lot in terms of how you sleep at
Yeah,
night.
and Michael, let's nail that one right on your head, on the head. First of all, awesome for you that you did that. But some people have no idea. Like when they get into a sleep problem, they think, well, I better sleep as late as I can in the day. And it's like, actually, do you really want to do what Michael's doing, which is as soon as he's up and going, he's hitting the street and getting sun into his retina,
Mm-hmm.
which is then creating serotonin, which magically somehow hangs out in your brain until the sun comes down and your brain goes, oh, remember that hormone? Cool, let's convert it to melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, I think if someone had just said to me, I don't know, a year or less into the insomnia that I was experiencing in 2018, hey, Nick, whatever you do before 10 a.m., get your butt on the street and walk for 30 minutes, I think it would have shaved a year or a year off my insomnia.
Yeah.
That's how big of a deal it is.
Yeah. So speaking of, what are some of the, I don't know, top 3, 5, however many you wanna mention, some of the things that are maybe not so obvious, like go to bed at the same time every day, whatever, like the sunlight thing. What are some of the top tips that you think? You already mentioned, don't freak out, even if you know that tonight's not going to be the best night, or you woke up in the middle of the night. Having a lack of anxiety is going to help you. What else? What are some of those things that people need to hear that will have a positive impact on their sleep?
I think a couple things. One of the things in the book, one of the chapters is hard work won't pay off. And that was one of the things that I was thinking about before your show, because so many of the things that you focus on, the opposite is true. If I work hard on my physical fitness and I don't over injure myself or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that, I'm just working hard, I'm going to get good results. If I force that extra rep at the end of my set, that's going to benefit me later. Sleep is a tricky beast. It's like if you try to force it and you try extra hard, whether that's I learned more information about it, so I should be able to sleep, or I learned all the steps of what you should do before you go to bed and I did them perfectly. It won't produce results like that. It's a much finer, subtler, sneakier thing to either repair for some people or just to improve
Mm-hmm.
for some people. So I would just say that too, is that for folks who like your work and are used to like really engaging physically and hard working to get these gains, sleep is like the karate opposite. It's like trying to grab water with one hand and having it slip out. So that's just another one of those like warnings that is like, don't apply that same idea. So one little tidbit for listeners is that if you're, and it's a two-part thing. One is if you're trying to shift your sleep to be earlier, do not try to do it more than 15 minutes at a time
Mm-hmm.
until a week or two later you go, oh, sweetheart, I think that we have gone upstairs and fallen asleep for 4 or 5 days in a row 15 minutes earlier. And that's when I coach them to go, great, turn the dial, let's go another 15 minutes until we hit the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be very helpful. And then one of the other things is making sure whatever your changes are at first is that they're tiny, meaning it could be a small duration. So I think I would be uh, negligent not to answer part of your question about what are things people can do. Even in my own book, even in my own past, just working on it still blew me away by how powerful mindfulness meditation research has shown to improve the falling asleep, the staying asleep, the waking up, the quality of the deep sleep. I mean, it just goes on. I mean, the things, Michael, that I've been on several podcasts talking about suicide. And one of the things we talk about is some research on basic mindfulness meditation for a few days a week, testing these like college age students 6 months later, and they have major decreases in suicidal thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But it really turns out, I would be like, to your point, like when your sleep isn't perfect, even though you're, Michael, a clearly physically fit guy, it kind of takes a toll, which tells me it's a big deal. I would say mindfulness meditation brings the second big deal. And so one of the metaphors that I make for people, one of the things I'll tell people right away is like, look, your brain, yes, we have neurologically discovered that it's plastic and can change, but the truth is it doesn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
It does not want to. It wants everything to stay the same, even if the same is bad.
Right.
I said, so I always tell clients, listen, I want you to think of your brain and your mind like a castle with two guards in the front. You got to be small enough to fit into the castle and then sort of grow the uprising from inside out. So that can be helpful for people to realize. And I think the second thing for people who are trying to start new routines with sleep, and that's a big crux of what you need to do, is this idea of it being flexible. That it doesn't have to happen at the exact time that you plan for the day. And that again makes it so that person can do it. So I've had clients where the idea was to do them at night, but after we met for 2 weeks, it never happened. So we started talking about their morning, and we said,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you like to jump out of bed and go outside. Let's reverse your morning sequence and try it at a different time and test it for 2 weeks. And let's cut down the amount of minutes for each of these things. One of the things I've enjoyed recently, Michael, is using AI to help customize little things like that. So in this guy's case, we started running AI, and basically we're like, we worked it until it was like, give us a 3-minute meditation and then I think we put in some parameters, that would do this or that or this. And and it kicked out this one that was like, for 1 minute it was the traditional type of mindfulness meditation,
Mm-hmm.
which is a much more active mental state. One was a sun meditation, and the third one was like forest bathing. Have you ever heard of forest bathing?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so it reminded me of a little baby forest breathing, where it was like, listen to the trees, listen to that. And that was it. So it was like, hey bud, do you think when you go outside in the morning with the dogs, you could take 3 minutes to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yeah, totally. In fact, we could add such and such, So those are those little kind of movements around that can really help somebody, and again, with the flexibility part, especially when you're starting, to be okay with forgetting. I forgot to do it.
Right.
Well, it's okay. It's still 3:30. I can do it now.
Right.
It's still okay to do it. And so that's helpful for people,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, that was a ton of good information. But before we wrap it up, you mentioned your book a couple of times. Where can people find it? Where can people find you?
Yeah.
Are you any resources that you're offering for those who are not quite ready to buy the book or whatever? Any chapters you mentioned before? You could offer a chapter that we can
Yeah.
include in the
So,
show notes.
yeah. So this is the cover, if it can be seen. Can you see it?
Uh huh.
Um, it's on Amazon. So that's available. I will say that the reviews have been really good so far that have been coming out. Again, I think what it does. First of all, I should say there isn't another sleep book like it. I've already upset some people for the things that I've said. So if you're like, I don't want to read a boring sleeping book, don't worry, I won't bore you. Number one. And number two, all of the subheadings have the reading length. So in terms of just pacing your busy life, you can look at it and go, oh, I got a minute and 35 seconds to read this next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So check that out on Amazon. And then the next place, and I can either send it to you in the chat or after for people to hold. My real like center location is LinkedIn, and that's the best place for folks to get me.
Okay.
But for any of your folks and your listeners, I'm happy to send a free PDF chapter. So yeah, those things are there, and yeah, I can send you the links for that stuff for sure.
Yeah, please do. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for hopping on the show, and I will keep you posted on when the show goes live.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it, and I love your show's premise and what you're doing, and I thought, maybe a little talk on sleep might fit just right where folks need.
All right. I think so. Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to connecting in the future,
All right.
Michael. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
Talk
Cheers.
to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
What if the modern world is robbing you of your testosterone? We're diving deep into what really drives T production, how it's made, where things go wrong, and most importantly, how to fix it naturally. Don't miss this one. Tune into the next episode to learn how to optimize your testosterone and take back your vitality.